Hello there and welcome to BEEMAN Live Saturday Night live stream back at Twitch and YouTube at the same time. Hello and welcome everybody. What you can see right besides me is the beautiful coast of Ecuador. And this is because I'm not really done setting up yet, but I figured I'd no longer let you wait. So here we go. I'm trying to do the live stream with Restream today. Trying out some new stuff in order to get a nice workflow. So there's this little icon up in the top there. Also, I really hope this makes it onto YouTube, so we have a following up with the other live stream. So the app we'll be working on today is something I've been working on with Prime Faces. It's an Angular app with Prime Faces, and I started to make some sidebar and yeah, super basic, nothing too special. But I will do more Prime Faces soon. And in today's episode, the first thing I would like to do is implement FORMLY. And this is something I've been talking about a lot, like since forever. I love working with FORMLY. I worked with FORMLY.js for AngularJS. And then I figured out it existed for Angular, and I was sold. And one of the great things that FORMLY allows you to do is generate forms, like the form you see here, without building any of the templates. So the form you can see rendered right here is this form. So you have your regular form element, you have your regular form group. It's built off of reactive forms. So no worry if your whole setup is built on your reactive forms. Then it gives you this FORMLY form component where you can pass in a model, you can pass in your fields, some options, a reference to the form, and that's it. And the form gets rendered out. Now, the real power, I think, is in this fields, because this fields is just a JSON object. As you can see right here, it has typing, and this JSON object allows you to create your own fields. So if you would add a field, it's a matter of this one. And the beauty of this is that it can be a JSON object right now, but you can have helper methods that will make it even faster to build forms. So what I'll do today in this episode is add the FORMLY integration for PrimeNG, and then make it work first, and then create a small wrapper around this thing. So that's it for now. Let's check Restream for a second. If I can, yeah, okay, I can make chat messages appear on the screen. That's pretty awesome. Get rid of this one for a second. Yeah, okay. And then let me take a quick look at what I need to do. So I think, yes, this is the setup I want. So this is the application I'm running here. Oh, and yeah, the application is called Chat. We have a few pages here, namely about and home. So the first thing I'll probably do is scaffold out a contact page. And the way I'm doing it is using nx generate at narwhal/angular module and give this page a name. And this is going to be our contact form. So contact and contact. And let's scaffold that out. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to publish into our Angular community that I'm doing a live stream. So maybe more people join. Twitch.tv/BEEMAN.DEV, and this is where most of you are probably watching. Hello everybody, don't be shy, say something, what you like to see live right now. Cool. So if you're not in the Angular community chat, you should definitely consider being there. If you're watching this tutorial and you like it, or this live stream and you like it, go to twitter.com/Angular Discord, and our invite link is here in the bio and in the homepage. This is the biggest community, Angular community on Discord, and it's pretty damn awesome if I say so. And yeah, we try to do a good job managing it, so everybody's welcome. If you have any comments, let them go there. If you want to help people, you can mark yourself as being a helper. It's just awesome. So let's go. This FORMLY offers schematics that automatically allow you to generate this. So it might be a good idea to just check this out and see if that works. Now, remember that my BEEMAN.DEV chat application is in an Nx workspace, so it's not your regular old Angular CLI-based project. It doesn't have an Angular JSON, and it does have a workspace.json instead. So let me see, this page got created, contact page. So then what I will do is open the header component and add a link to contact. Simple and easy. With contact / contact, and then I guess that should already do its first things. So open this one here, and we have a page called contact. So far, nothing special. So I like that. This is predictable. So what we're going to do is add the contact form here. And before we're going to do that, let me quickly switch over these two. There we go. Before we do that, I'm going to add a commit. So the commit is add a contact page, because I would like to be able to roll back my changes. So if this schematic doesn't do as I like, and I'm quite critical, I can tell you, I can roll back. So taking this from the clipboard and then changing NX with NG, I can already quite sure tell that this is not going to work, because NX add is not a recognized command. It doesn't hurt trying. So let's see what this does. It cannot find the project Nx formly schematics. Yeah, so what actually Nx tried to do is Nx run ngx formly / schematics and call the add on it. This will give exactly the same message. So dive in this real quickly. Let's open workspace.json here and see that our projects that we have here are called chat end-to-end UI pages message. So the first thing it claims, it complains about, is it cannot find a project with this name. Well, that's totally correct. It doesn't exist. So if we would say nx run chat semicolon add, it will try to run it on that project. So now the first method is gone. It will find the project chat, because that's actually listed inside here. But now it doesn't have a target. So long story short, if at any point you see nx add, because there's also ng add, these are two different things. Luckily though, there's a way around this. Yeah, we have a cure for this madness. What we can do instead is add the schematics library manually. And once this is installed, we can just execute the schematics with the nx generate command. Now the ng add that we're using normally in an Angular project is basically just calling the ng add schematic in this package. So if we take a peek here, once this opens and we see formally, we check the schematics, and we see that there's actually an ng add schematic, and this is the one we want to execute. So we're going to do that manually. In the collection, you can see that this is one of the schematics that's there, and this is the one we want to do. It appears that it also has a schematic to generate a wrapper component. Fields in a formly form have the field itself, and they have a wrapper, which is useful for putting labels there, putting validation methods, etc., etc. So this is something other nice that we can look at. Before that, though, let's move to our terminal and okay, this one is rebuilding. And that's all for just installing a dependency. I'm so happy once ngcc is no longer needed. Yes, ngcc, I know you already have a process running. It's this one right here. I'm not even going to interrupt. It's Saturday night. We're all doing fine. How are you all doing, beautiful people? Tell me in the chat. I'm sincerely curious how you all are doing. So this one's for you. Now, once this is done, we can execute the command nx generate. It should be done any second now. You know what? I'm just going to type it here already. Nx generate, or G, at ngx-formally schematics and call ng-add. Now this is the thing that will add accept our parameter. So in the documentation, right here, we found that there is a UI theme parameter. So we should be able to say end UI theme -- UI - theme equals PrimeNG. So let's take a look how that goes. Okay, I'm going to stop this one. And then the command we want to execute is actually UI - theme PrimeNG, and that's for good measures. Try a dry run. Dry run. If only I could spell. Also, those of you who are paying attention, my backdrop music is gone. I'm so sorry for all you. I really liked it. And it's nice to have something to bounce on if you're waiting for compiling something to ESM 2015. However, it also renders my videos unusable for reuse. So if I want to take pieces out of my live stream and put them together and put them on YouTube as a lesson, if you will, that's also almost impossible to get right if you have music on the background. So yeah, that's one of the things, that's why things change. Hey there, Mr. Sanchez. Thank you. Sanchez is learning about DX. Haven't done anything with it, but it looks super cool. I can tell you it is pretty cool. I really like it. I'm doing almost all my projects in it. So yeah. Happy if you have any specific things you want me to touch on in some of my live streams, by all means tell me and I'll do it. Hey there, there's Mr. Zach, ZLS, representing live. Hey there, Zach. For those of you who don't know, Zach's the inspiration for me doing BLS and calling it BLS. I was thinking about a stream, but then Zach had CLS. I was on CLS, and the guy drove me crazy. I was like, I want to be as cool as Zach. And yeah, so here's my attempt. Yeah, this is the truth, the biggest truth ever being spoken. No reason ever not to use NX, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to add a small aside here, is that Mr. Zach DeRose works for NX, so he is fan by far, but I'm not working for NX, and I can honestly say the same. I'm a huge fan, and I'm not shy to tell it. So what it says right now is it cannot find undefined, and yeah, sure, I would have a hard time finding undefined. So let's could not find. Let's quickly check. It doesn't seem to be coming from NGX formally. Now, the reason I think this happens is that we don't have an Angular JSON. That just doesn't exist because it's an NX workspace with the NX CLI. So what we can do, ln-s, make a symbolic link, workspace.json to angular.json. And now we do have an Angular JSON, and it's actually linked to workspace JSON. Very convenient. Thank you, Unix. With this, I think this schematic will, well, at least we get a step further. We get another error message. And the error message this time is that it cannot find Angular CLI. So basically the takeaway of this error, the things we're running in here, is that this schematic, while it would work if we would have an Angular-based NX workspace, it will not work this way because it cannot find all certain things. This is probably one of the reasons why the team at Narwhal, the NX team at Narwhal, they actually advise you, if you're running Angular apps, by all means just start a Angular application. But I was stubborn and I didn't do it. So here we are. That's okay. You can just add Angular CLI as a dev dependency. And with that in place and our mocked workspace.json, we should be able to run this schematic. If not, no big deal. I'm going to do it manually because that's another option. Okay, at least this compilation is done. And this one, I even stopped the dev server. That's how desperate I was. And yeah, Zach is very, very biased. He is. Now, but Narwhal team has all the reason to be very, very proud because it's just amazing what they did. And yeah, so if you haven't checked it out yet, by all means check it out. Reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions. If you want to know something about NX, I'm super happy to help. In our Angular community Discord, we have a channel about NX where there's interesting stuff. Today we talked about structuring an NX workspace. And another nice thing, soon on BLS, I'm also going to invite Lars. And Zach, really, trust me, I'm not trying to copycat you with anything, but I'm also going to invite Lars. Not sure if I'll do it twice in the same month, but I will have him on soon. And Lars and I, we will be doing a review about how to structure NX workspaces. And this is something that's often asked in the Narwhal community Slack. How do you structure it? Well, and this is the thing where NX doesn't really have an opinion. It suggests you that you can divide your monorepo into apps and into libs, but there's that. And there are several ways to go around this. And it really depends on, well, probably your opinion and your experience, but also what plans do you have with your app. For instance, in my app right here, I have a top level, in my monorepo, I should say, in my project. I have an application called Chat, the end-to-end application, and a few libraries. Now, if we look at the structure of these libraries, from looking at just the name, nothing gives away that this is front-end only. So if your whole application is the front-end only, you don't have a back-end here, then that's fine. If not, you might want to revert to calling this like chat dash message, or maybe Angular dash message if you want to put the technology in there. So Lars and I are going to chat about it. I really hope that's going to be interesting for a lot of you. And I know I'm interested in looking at other people's way to do this. So yeah, it kind of came from the idea where I have a BEEMAN.DEV show and tell, where I invite people to tell about technology. And the way we're going to do it is that they're going to explain me how they work. So I'm going to do blank slate, a project like this, an empty project, or whatever they tell me is the starting point. And then off the starting point, I go. So if they say, hey, I always start by creating an app called API, then I'll do that. And so NX is not, Lars doesn't work with NX, so it's not his library, but I'm also going to invite library authors doing the same thing. So if you want to see some library author, explain their stuff to me and basically have me fail miserably while they look at it, then please tell me what you like to see, and I'll happily invite said library author. Now, Angular CLI is installed. Let's start the server again. We're looking at a lot of loading bars this session. I can feel it already. So a question from Critical Boot here. Hi, Beam. I'm curious to know how you handle testing in NX. That's a great question. And to be totally honest with you, I work on a lot of prototypes for people and greenfield projects where often tests are being an afterthought. I'm also not from the school that I start with doing TDT. So personally, if I do testing, it's going to be fairly minimal. I generally start off with good intentions, do some critical stuff, and then I generally don't have the discipline to work it all the way up to the end. With that being said, NX has great support for Jest and for Cypress. So if you want to do a backend test, you can totally do so. This will also be part of the course I'm working on for Egghead, where I'm going to add an E2E test to your Node application or your Nest.js API, actually. But the way it's done inside an NX workspace is the unit tests are inline. So if you generate a component, it will generate a spec file with it. As you can see here, header component, header spec. Now, from this moment on, it's no longer NX specific. So here it's just your regular old Angular CLI test. So there's not so much to do about it, and then you just run it. The E2E tests have a separate application. They are represented as being an application. They sit next to the app. So Angular app has a chat E2E, and this is the one that's being executed. And if we look at the open workspace.json here, if we look at this one, we can see that it's just another project. Like this one, it's marked as an application. And because it's an Angular app, it's configured to run Cypress by default. So this is that. But yeah, I hope to do more testing and do it on camera soon. So with that out of the way, we should now be able to run our schematic. So if I say nx generate and I take this line that I just had, I call the ng add schematic from the ngx formally schematics package. I pass in UI theme is PrimeNG and do the try run. Now please do this because that would be awesome. Cannot find property kind of undefined. Okay. From looking at the error message, this seems to be something with the TypeScript AST, if I'd had to guess. Anyway, this is taking too long. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add manually ngx formally /core and ngx formally /prime ng. This will install the libraries for me. And let's then take a look at the documentation because it will tell us what it will do. Now, I'm the type of people that always wraps around a third library, like almost always, let's say 95% of the time. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to wrap around NGRX. I will use that directly and I will upgrade when it changes, but UI libraries, if you see me integrating Angular Material or Bootstrap, I will always end up with a library and try to expose the minimal amount of logic that's specific to that library, so it's easy to change and easy to update, and it just feels better to clean it up this way. Now, forms is not an exception. It's actually a part where I even go further with it. I might end up just having a whole forms module that only handles anything related to forms and defining them. But in this case, I'm gonna use my UI module. So I got a library called UI, and inside UI, I generated a default Angular library. Comes with a UI module, which anytime will be loaded now. Inside lib, we have the UI module. And then I already have a module here for my PrimeNG stuff. So here you can see, it seems like I practiced what I preached, wrapping around a library. And yeah, so I'm going to do the same here, and I'm going to create a file called formally.module.ts. And this file is just going to export a class called formally module, and will be decorated with the ng module decorator, as you would expect. And we're going to have some imports here. We're going to have some exports here, and that'll be it. And this one will be loaded in my UI module. So if at any time I need to have access to forms, the only thing I need to do is import UI module. And I'm actually going to set it next, or I'm actually going to set it before formally module. So we're also alphabetically in order, which I think most of us nerds like, or at least appreciate. Good. With that out of the way, we have our wrapper around formally, and this is the formally module. Let's start by implementing it. So, as said earlier, formally works around reactive forms module. It's a wrapper around reactive forms module. It's an opinionated wrapper. And in my experience, and I've worked with, well, quite a lot of Angular apps from other people on other teams while I was doing a lot of contracting. In my experience, you either use a library like Formally or you develop something that's very similar yourself. And that's kind of we developers are often very not invented here. We tend to not trust third-party libraries directly. We suspect that they're not powerful enough, that our use case is unique. Let me tell you, your use case is probably not unique. Your use case will very likely fit in with what Formally has to offer. And to that extent, I never found any reason where I couldn't use it. or where not using it would have a lot of benefits. So that's something to bear in mind when you think about doing this stuff. If you're building something similar to this that handles forms dynamically, you might want to look into the standardized solution and use that. So with that being said, if you're by the way building your own form, if you're building your own forms library because you want to understand how this stuff works, by all means do it. And if you want to publish it, I'm not trying to gatekeep here. The only thing I'm saying, if you want to use something that works and that works well and that's being actively developed, you don't have to build it yourself. But I'm all for people re-implementing their same stuff just because that's interesting or they want to learn something. So yeah. Okay, so I made a rookie mistake here. I called it formally module, but formally module is actually what we want to import from the library. So I'm going to call this UI formally real quick and update the reference. Okay, so reference is updated here. And then I can import formally module from Nginx formally core. So we need to call the for root in our the place where we initialize it, formally module, and we get it from formally core. So formally supports different UI libraries. As you already suggested, I installed as you might already have seen, I installed the PrimeNG library. So here you can put in Angular, here you can put in Material, Bootstrap, Ionic, and there's a bunch more. Native script, Kendo UI, and I think that's more or less all of them. So next to the formally module, we also install we import the formally PrimeNG module, and we don't have to generally call anything on this. Nope. Okay. And in my exports array, I'm going to export formally module and formally PrimeNG module. Now, one of the beautiful things about formally, and one of the things that make it so useful, is that you can do custom fields. So we'll take a look in that in a bit, but just for your understanding, here in this for root, this is where we'd have our custom fields. So this is obviously strongly typed. We can add types here, and then if we want to have a field type called color picker, we can define it here in an array. Same goes for wrappers, the things that wrap around the field, like your label, your description, we can define it here. We can add validation methods, validators, extensions, and extras, which I have no clue what this is for. Okay, there's extras. There's more stuff to explore for me. I generally don't use it, but yeah, we will add some custom types here in the future. Custom types go here. But first, I want to see if this works as expected. So just making sure here that, okay, it looks like server compiles. It looks like my app still compiles. So what we can do is actually go into my page, and inside my contact page, get it here. Well, I'm not going to bother with it right now. In here, we're going to say formally form, which is the component that gets passed in, and we can import this, and it tells me it can see, at least my IDE can see, like, hey, this one is available through the formally module or through the UI module. I'm going to pick UI module here, and it'll be, that's like the abstraction. I'm still using formally directly, but that will change in a bit. We'll create our own custom UI form command. And then what I can do here is pass in the fields and make sure that I have a local reference fields. So in contact component, I'm going to say fields is an array. Now I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to use the inline template, so I got it all in one place. Ain't that beautiful? So here we're going to do this one. And we're going to get rid of CSS as well, because ain't nobody need that, and not even a selector. We don't need any of this. We just want to have a form. Now, with this, I want to create my forest field. So let's create a field, and let's make sure that this is typed for now. So this is a formally field config array. So I'm going to say here, I have a key called name, and it's of type input. Let's do this for now, and let's add more in a little bit. We want to probably have some sort of button here. We'll wire it up later, and here we're going to say contact me, because after all, it's going to be a contact form. So rendering a form, if you haven't done this type of stuff before, this is what it's like. Let me get a sip of water, people. So this form got rendered, this form field got rendered by FORMLY with the PrimeNG integration. So you could say, look, Ma, no templates. This is it from a template level, more or less. What we can do is add a form here. And this form is just your regular old form group. So your Angular developers out here, you know this kind of stuff. So you say, you need to have a form group. But with FORMLY, you don't need to define this, the controls itself. This will be handled for you dynamically. Now let's quickly add an email field and a message field. Now email is of type, but we have type email. So we can say, we can add an object here, and that is, let me see what it's called. I need to figure out what it's called. It's called template options. So this template options define how we render this actual template. And in template option, we can say, okay, this type is actually email. And now it will generate for us a input type equals email. Whereas the default right here, this will render an email type is text. Now the last one, let's say text area. Text area. Okay, Prettier will format it, and this will render the 3 fields. There you go. It will render the email, it will render something, the name, it will render the email, and it will render the text area and a button. Now bear in mind, I've never worked with PrimeNG and FORMLY. I just knew that it existed, so this is why I picked up the combination. So bear with me in order that we make this like kind of pretty. But some things I do know, so you can add label. You can add a description. Enter your email. We won't spam. Sure we don't. And here as well, let's add some more template options. Let's add label, message, and for the first one as well, also template options. And have label, name here. So this should make it at least a bit more like a form where we have, there you go. And now we have name, email, and message. One of the things we always like to do is stuff like, okay, you don't want your button to be active if the form is not valid. Before I do anything else, let me quickly head over to the PrimeNG documentation. And inside here, let's quickly take a look so we can make our button a bit prettier. Because that's the least thing I can do for you all. Now, here we are, button. I'm just only interested in this part actually. Type button. Yes. So this one is going to live inside their own div. Button here. And it's the P button directive. And this can be imported from PrimeNG button. But as I suggested, I would prefer to import stuff from my own library, so I at least have some control over what is being imported. I have some vision on what I'm using. So let's go here, button module from PrimeNG, and make sure it gets. And then back here, it's already loaded because I'm doing the UI module. So let's stick with this one, make it button submit, and then just your regular old Angular click handler. We're going to call it submit form. and submit form. At this moment, we're just going to say console log this.form.values. .value, I'm sorry. So they should do that. And here is a error message. Oh, I'm not happy about those errors. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, with you folks. I like to be inclusive here. So cool, there we have it. So the button now looks nice, and we see that the output gets rendered as you would expect it, and the inputs get handled. So this all works pretty much as expected. So now let's make it so that this button doesn't get, that it's not clickable. So we want this button to be disabled. And this is where this handy little reference to form comes to, because as suggested earlier, as I told you earlier, this is a regular Angular form. So there's nothing that prevents us from saying, okay, disabled on this button is not form.valid. And this, valid. And this will make it so that as long as they all do their thing, this button will be invalid. It will be not clickable. Hey, this is not working as expected. That's interesting. Ah, yes, I think I know why. And what might be invalid is if we make stuff required. So we're going to say name is required. Email is required. Let's see if that fixes our button. There you go. The button is now grayed out. This has a nice little asterisk because it's required. And for now, that's it. We would like to have like real email validation. So that's something we're going to add in a little bit. Or not if I forget about it, but then just leave a comment on YouTube and I will add it in the next video if I think about it. Not sure. But yeah, so there you go. So just to recap, what we've done is we've installed the dependencies, we created a simple module and loaded the Formly module with the Formly module of our integration and exposed this UI Formly module throughout our app. And inside our app, yes, this contact is the one, but actually interested in the component. Then inside the component, we have Formly form, and we say we pass in a form to do fancy stuff like to get a reference to the form. We pass in the fields. Let's say you want to pre-fill your data. We're going to say we have an existing model called, for instance, form data. And then if we create this form data, we can say name and pass in some default name. Now, the place where this is most useful if you have a form and you want to render existing data. So here we go. It now renders name into this place. So Zach DeRose has a great question. Any way to add a custom validator function? Is just to a reference of the form group? No. So it's, I think, and I've worked with teams where people, if they saw this structure, they were like, oh yes, this is going to change me a lot of time. And then after it, they started immediately going, okay, I know what to do. And they started doing stuff with this.form. I think for the majority of things, you probably don't need this. So you're probably making life more difficult. Now, all of this works, or all its functionality is declarative. So what we can do here inside this thing is add validators and validations and async validators. And if I recall correctly, these things take, and I'm not sure, I think it's the field and the model, but I'm not sure. I need to look it up. But let's check this out. And here you can just run your validation. I think this is not the shape. I think we also need to have something like the message in there. So let's quickly look it up. Let's open this up right here. Custom validation. So there's two ways to do validation in Formly. One of them is added here to the method. Sorry, one of it is here adding it to the module, and this is the one I personally use the most. So in most of my projects, I have a set of defined validators that, for instance, validates email. So let's take a look at that one first. And I'm gonna, instead of need to return if null errors, yeah, I'm actually gonna share this. You have definitely a point, Zach. This is the weird syntax. And also, I think in the validators tree, and this might be something related to formally, I need to pass in what kind of thing I'm validating. So I need to say name or name length, for instance, and that would be a key, and then that has a method. But we'll get to there in a second. In the Kickstart UI library that I've been working on, I'm using the same thing. So if I'm searching this one, hit T to find search, and say formally, then you see my UI form module, and this is my form abstraction. So it's all out there. Please use this stuff. Don't copy over whatever I did in this live stream. This is better. And what you see me doing here is adding a few validation messages. So I'm just going to copy these over for now. And in my UI formally method, I'm going to add these validation messages. Now, let's start with the required one and see if this PrimeNG message, PrimeNG integration actually renders out these required things. So there you go. If I tap through this form and I pass through a form that's required, this will say this field is required. And this validation method comes from here. I add an exclamation mark and it will render it here just as expected. So okay, so this is actually that message. Now the validators that I'm using here actually come from this validators file. So this is a file, this one, index.ts right here. I'm going to copy this all over and add it here, but and you'll see UI formally.validators.ts. Just going to paste it in here and comment these out and make sure that I can import them. Import them all at once, please. So there we go. So now we have all the a few default messages, and these things can also be dynamic. So if I say I want to have a number with a min and a max, or let's give name a min and a max length. That's more likely. So we're going to say name min length here is going to be 2, and the max length is going to be 50. Now, these things add up. So I'm going to get rid of my initial data here, so it's not pre-filled, and then we'll see that so yes, Zach, the message they do support interpolation of dynamic variables, because we can see that now this name field, it will first say, hey, it's required. Okay, then I put in one character and it said, oh, it should have at least 2 characters. And then there you go, it is now done. So this stuff works pretty much as you would expect it. And yeah, it's for me, it's one of the game changers in Angular development. It's one of the things I miss and I rebuild if I don't have it. And so max length is not gonna allow me the error message because it doesn't even allow me to put it in. The template is implemented in such a way that if we inspect this element and we check it out here, that we see that max length is actually set here. So this, I'm gonna bump this up a few notches. This is the field property that gets actually rendered, and it's max length 50. Now, while we're looking at this, you can see like, okay, there's formly form, then there's formly fields, there's a wrapper, and that's about it. So in terms of the generated templates, it works in a pretty clean way. Let's keep it open, but keep it on the console tab and make it a bit smaller. So this is our form, and what I'm gonna do here is also take a look at my email validator, which is also coming from there, and that is implemented as a real validator. So inside here, I'm gonna say validation message, and I have email validator here. This is the validator that we're looking at. Now, what I'm actually doing with this one, I'm just reusing whatever Angular gives me, because I'm not going to reinvent an email validator. And now with this in place, I should be able to say that my email field is being validated as an email. And I think I should say validator's email right here, and that's it. Now, the reason I'm a bit unsure about this thing, and I didn't realize that this template options, I forgot the name, is that I actually don't write these manually. I see this as a great opportunity to write a helper function, and we'll get to that right away once we get this validation out of the way. So required, yes, one field, yes, okay, two fields, good. Now this is required, and it should actually render it out, which it does not. So let's take a look at the helper method that I got here. So my UI form helper, this is the method that I have. And I'm first going to peek into the email field, email. And I'm going to see validation, validators, validation email. Okay, so this is the string that I have. It is over. Validators, validation email, and check if this works. Definitely should. There you go. A is not a valid email address. A at is not a valid email address, but A at host is a valid email address. And so yeah, validation to put it to make it easy for yourself. Do this on the place where you, if it's app wide, do it on the place where you register it. Add your validator here. Add your validator message, and you're golden. You can do it on a field basis, and we might take a look at doing some async stuff in a bit, where we, for instance, check if a username exists. But for now, let's see if we can get this helper function done. And first, do a small commit, because this is probably some nice place for people to take a look at the code. So implementing formally. Also going to stop and start the dev server here, because see if we get rid of the error message. It's sad, but truly one of the ways to get rid of error messages in your dev server. So yeah, I actually last week, so I started with this app last week, Saturday night live stream, and I never finished. I never got to the formally part. I was so busy looking at how PrimeNG worked and figuring out stuff, and my PC was slow and all that kind of stuff, or my laptop. And so I got a comment on YouTube, and this person said, hey, where's the formally stuff? So the main reason I'm starting with formally right now is this. One of the things I mentioned briefly, so there's different templates, and that means if we would run this same, we can copy over this form field, this form definition here, and this template, and run it in a material or bootstrap project, and it will render the same fields. And that's pretty awesome if you ask me. Like, it's not very realistic that you change UI library like every other week, but there's definitely places where I've been that we decided to change stuff. If you don't have to worry about the forms, that's definitely helping you a lot. Just saying. But yeah, this is really turning into a sales pitch for Formally, and I think it totally deserves it. It's just awesome. So this is, I'm going to call it helper, UI form helper. Now, this is something I've been doing out of habit. I create a helper, and on the helper, I put static methods. So I can say static input, takes a key of string, and then some options. And I make this one return the key and their options. So that would be the first thing. If you're thinking about abstracting this kind of stuff, formally field config. So you take the key out of the config and you basically destructure it when you return it. And this, it doesn't bring you a whole lot, but it makes it a little bit cleaner. And I think I just like the syntax. Okay, it wants to import from the path. So let's go here in index.ts and export helper. There we go. Now it imports it from UI formally helper from Beehive Chat UI, which is good. And now in my fields definition, I'm just going to say, okay, give me an input with key name. And this is type input, and then we have some template options. So what I generally do is I have this key, which I always want to set. I have the formally field config options, but I also have the template options. So I say template options is formally template options. Second parameter. The default is to an empty array and the other one as well. And then I'm saying template options is this one. And what this allows me to do is getting a very, very quick way to type keys. One other thing I want to do here is add type. So this input is actually a field of type input. So what I can say, make this the field. So this is your raw field. It starts off with a type because that's the most important. If we don't have a type, we don't know what we want to do. A type, a key, template options and options. And type here is going to be input. And the rest is actually going to return whatever we pass into UI formally field helper field. So we're going to say UI formally helper dot field type input, then pass in the key, template options and options. And this might seem like a bit strange at first, but it's an amazing way to quickly get to very, very little code for maximum reuse. Now I'm going to save this all, and I'm going to check out why my TypeScript's not happy. I'm a bit surprised by that one. Cannot find name UI formally helper. Well, I think you can. Let me quickly restart TypeScript service because that at times helps it be less weird. But yeah, fact of the matter is we have this second input here, and we can say, okay, label here is name2, and then name2 will appear as a second field. So here we go, and now we have two name properties. Now, and this is where, if you ask me, the real power of formally lies. It's amazing by itself, and it's very cool that you can do all this kind of stuff. I think it's even cooler that this, having some way to automate your stuff, gives you a very nice declarative way to do your forms, because this UI formally helper also doesn't really expose anything related to formally. So we've successfully abstracted that part of the equation. You can, even if you build your own UI library and UI form library, I would probably suggest you to build stuff like this. Now, email is another input type, and this is where this helper method gets really interesting, because for email, we can copy over the input field. Call it email here. Now for email, we can already be pretty sure that there's a few things, a few assumptions we can make. So instead of just passing through the template options as they get passed into, we can actually define a few of these things. So we can say, okay, you know what, type here is email, but also label is most likely going to be email. And if not, feel free to override it. Validators, I'm definitely eager to have email validation on by default. And let's just add this one here. And of course, this will not work if you add custom validators. You do not need some more logic here to wrap this all up, to merge these things in nicely with each other. But you get the idea. Email description, I'm not really sure. But if we now say UI formally helper dot email and give it a field email, we can see that with one line of code, we have an email field that's super similar to the one here. Okay, it's not required. Add that in as an option. Required true. And that is it. And we have now copied over. We went from this like 10-line code to this one line. Now, people that think lines of code are precious and you should have little of them, then this is your gig. Let's finally abstract text message, which is going to be a copy of input. Call it text area, by the way, not text message. Make it type text area, and then the rest is the same. So this will give us the UI formally helper, .text area, pass in the name of the thing, and the label is message. Now, ain't this a beautiful form? I'm honestly super happy when I see stuff like this. If you define your forms, show me one other Angular app that uses native Angular forms that has forms that are descriptive and clear as this. I don't think it exists. But I might have missed something. And now we have our form and it's back and we have validation and it's all good and life is just beautiful this way. There you go. So with regards to formally, there is definitely more to it. There's more ins and outs. There is stuff like you can do amazing stuff. And the most useful part is probably the examples. So here in the examples, you can find a ton of stuff. How to do repeating sections, which is a very common thing. You can do cascading selects, which is another thing that's like this. These kind of things take time for somebody to get to get this right and to make this work right. If you run formally, you merely just put it in like here. And it's magic in this sense that if I copy over this stuff and paste it in, I think this will totally work like straight away. I need to comply with these operators here, get them from RxJS, I'm sorry. But this all looks good. I don't have any error message here. So this should give me there you go, sucker. Get back to team. Okay, I'm doing something wrong here. I don't have browser animations module loaded. You are so immensely right. Let's go and do this. Hey there, Codephobia. Welcome. Oh, and actually, Dominic is here as well. Nice. PrimeNG, not Angular material, which seems to be everywhere. So yeah, today I casted a vote. Casted votes on Twitter. And lo and behold, the thing that won was PrimeNG. So let me quickly pull it up. I hope in the future I get some coworker like Joe Rogan where I should just, hey, pull up this and that for me. But yeah, we're not there yet. Future. So PrimeNG won with a whopping 50%. Now there's one thing, that's one disclaimer here, and that's that the person Kagatai Sivici, the one who wrote PrimeNG, retweeted it, and he says like, okay, we Turks have the habit of calling out every other Turk when we know, including relatives and friends, to vote a poll when it relates to us. So yeah, it might be a bit biased, but anyway, I'm going to run with it. And this is for my Egghead.io course. So on Egghead, I got a course on Nest.js with GraphQL and an NX workspace. And I'm going to do a follow-up course that adds an admin UI, and this is going to be using PrimeNG thanks to this poll. So show him the clip, Jamie. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. Show them the clip. So Codephobia, that's a great question. Yes, it does allow you to take values from an API endpoint. Actually, when we take a look at this, let's do this and go to the contact component and say, okay, here I want to have a drop down. So I'm going to have an input and going to give it a key. Let's use my formally helper. Why am I doing so? So like a caveman. I'm just going to say select here. I'm going to have the key be, like, let's say country. I'm going to have a label that says country. And then I'm going to have options. And the options are is a shape that takes various things. So the basic one would be label USA and then value USA, 2 letters, US, and then let's do I don't know, Canada. Let's do Colombia and let's do Turkey, because that's where PrimeNG comes from. This is the default. This is the most simple way to get a select box, a drop down, and this works as expected. Now, oftentimes these are things you want to get from an API, and luckily you can just pass in an observable here. So to answer your question, if your endpoint can be accessed by an observable, which is obviously not a real question, but more like, yeah, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. And there you go. And here you can change stuff. Another thing that I do all the time when I work with forms like this is actually print out the form data in a pre-tag and map it to JSON, pipe it to JSON, so you can at least see what is being selected in the fields. So let's get back to this one. And if I then change a thing, then you can see, okay, here is my, actually gets created. But yeah, these dropdowns can also be implemented using so the single selects are these. They just take or an array or any observable. And of course, you can just make a method that spits out this array for you. So if this was really the use case and we would have key values be the same, you would probably have like, okay, these are the values I want. Just give me this stuff, and then map over it and take like value, return an array with value, and label also set to value. Something like this, you'll probably get the drill. And this is an observable. This should do the same thing. I think the most powerful thing of this whole concept is just JavaScript from here on out, and it will work with whatever stuff works with JavaScript, and that's what kind of makes it nice and easy. Like, there's no reason you cannot generate these JSON structures on your backend, right? So the way this thing works, so the initial checkbox, the initial select box is a simple one. So it takes template options, and it takes the options that are actually passed in. It looks like it also takes ID and name. I only use like label and value, but it can be that we can say value is like ID, label is name. It also totally works. I wouldn't know. We're going to find out right away. So let's check this one. No, this is empty. I'm not sure why this works. I do know why this works. Let me get back to this. So in your, the defaults are label and value as I had them, and you can say, what is your value prop and what is your label prop? This is the reason why it works. So let's return this to what it was. Label and value. Get rid of these fellas for a bit. So yeah, this is a default field. Now the second field is not default. The second field, what it does, it bases its stuff on the value changes of the sport control. So this is the sport control. And now we can add hooks to our fields. And Zach, I think this is what we talked about on your stream. Like, yeah, you want to do stuff custom logic. This is how you do it with FORMLY. So you can do an on init hook on your template. Now this, what it actually renders is a component, so you can trigger into the on init hook of the component that gets rendered and set up stuff. For instance, set a value listener to the item in your form that's called sport, which is this one. So additionally, we could listen to other fields that we want to have here, but basically based on what happens here, we can filter out the themes and we can return new stuff. Now this is, as you can see, these options, these are being assigned to the field options here. So when we are in the onInit method and we get the field passed in, what we actually get passed in is a reference to this object itself. So we can say field.templateOptions, which is then this one, and then options, which is this one, and assign it to something. Are these hooks basically utilizing the control value accessor here? Honestly, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm not aware of this part. I'm not familiar with this part of Formly, but it might very well be. I've never looked at how these on inits are implemented. But yeah, this is basically the way. And now, if we look at the things we gain, I think the things we gain are quite big, because first of all, we separated concerns by the rendering out of our forms and the actual definition of our forms. We no longer need to render our own forms because they're there already. So that's one benefit. Another benefit is that you now have a reusable fields. So because, okay, here we say formally field config array, and this is the fields of this page, but there's no reason why you can just isolate this fella and at some point in your app say, okay, every time we want to have a name field, it's just going to be this object. You'll probably export it then. You can say, okay, this is my name field, and then at the place where you want to use it, just give me the name field. Maybe a bit more realistic is to make this a function that takes the key and spits out a form, which is what I would say makes it even more flexible. And then you can say, okay, give me here a name field called first name, maybe first name and last name. And then it probably also makes sense to have a label here. So you say first name and last name. Update signature of a method, and yep, call this the name field. Call this your label actually, and say, okay, this is label. Right, so you can be super creative and flexible in how you actually define your fields. And now you've brought it back from injecting this helper to a very domain-specific thing, like, hey, I want to have like a name field. And then if we look at it, we see that, okay, yeah, no surprises here. This is rendering out the fields, and they're in the key of whatever we decide to give it to. So yeah, this is probably the second nicest thing that I really like about it, is like, you make your fields reusable. How often do you have a similar field that's on your edit screen as on your add screen? But then the edit screen has other functionality than the add screen, but there's like small little differences. And now you're worrying about, and if you do this on component level, it can be messy, can get messy quite quickly. With Formly, you're way more flexible in that sense. So this is what I really like. Now, let's take a look and see what happens if we try to add a field of a type that doesn't exist. So we can say, we can add any field type here and pass it a name. So let's say I want to have a color picker. So I want to have color and say the field's going to be color. That's it. I'm going to hope that this doesn't exist yet, because if this does exist, the demo breaks, but no, there you go. The type color could not be found. And this is because, well, there is no such type in the Formly definition. I'm going to take a quick peek here at how I did my custom fields, because I always forget about it. Do I have it here? I don't have it here. I'm going to take it from Formly. And going to have a custom validation, nope. And let's see where we do this actually, types. I think example. And let's take a quick loop. So yeah, okay. So here we do a similar thing. We add a type that does not exist. Type button is not a specific thing. And the thing we need to do is create a component and have it extend field type. So in here, I'm going to say UI formly field.color.ts. And I mean, naming at this moment is not the most important thing. And this one extends field type. A field type comes from here. And this is a component with a template. So with this, I can go into my Formly module, declare this component as I would with any other, import it, of course. Then inside types, I can add a data structure where I can say, hey, the name color maps to component, and pass in this component. And then if all is good and well, it should now render out my template. This is my color. Now, and as you see, this is not a component, but this is not an input, but it's definitely a clean and quick way to dynamically load any template. And this is also let me quickly add here input type. I think we even have, there you go, type is color. So let's run with this for now. Say input, this is my color. Here you go, and we have a color picker built in. So yeah, I'm in love, as you can tell. I really, really think this is the right way to doing forms. This is a hill I'm willing to die on, and this is an open invitation to anybody. Like, hey, if you have like something complex and you doubt if it can be done, I'm definitely interested in checking out if we can do this in Formly, because I think it can do a lot. So yeah, there's a few more things I need to do in order to get this all to work, to make this a proper form, and I don't really have an example online right here. So let me see if there is if there's an example here. This is all validation, then it's Bootstrap specific. Now, in any case, the Formly source code is pretty well maintained. This is one of the better maintained libraries that I rely on. This guy, Abdelatif, is amazing, is an amazing open source contributor. He is always responsive, and yeah, he pulls out new releases. When you find an issue, it will be there fast generally. Now, this is what we support. So let's take a look at the PrimeNG implementation actually, and what we want to do. So if I build this input component, which is color, I would always model it off the existing input. So we're going to take this one and put this one in the template and just make sure that type is color. Now there is better ways to do this, because I can, what you can do is just create an alias. So there's faster ways to get around this, but for now, I just want to show you all that this is how it works. Make this one type color. Having this form control in the Formly field, so you can actually see there's not so much to it. To create a Formly field, and you can convert any of your existing fields. So if you have a developer that made a beautiful custom component for you at some point, you can reuse this with Formly. That is not a problem. I'm soon going to get rid of this email validation because now it's getting in the way. I want to submit this stuff, and there you go, we have the color. Right? So creating the component is creating a new field type is as easy as creating a component, declare it, and add it to the types array and give it a name. And that's all there is to it. So yeah, this is your way to do custom stuff, and from here on you can just knock yourself out. Same goes for wrappers. Wrappers are also very similar to this kind of stuff. Let's take a quick look if there's any more things to touch on in the Formly example side, and I'm happy to answer any questions if somebody has curious about how things work, how to do stuff. Now, one of the things I've worked on, and Yuri Strumklona also worked on this one, he did a huge part of this, is support for JSON schema. So I'm not going to go into depth about what JSON schema is. You probably have seen it, and if you don't know what it is, you most likely have worked with it in any way, in one way or another. What this brings us is the ability to add JSON schema, and I'm just going to find an example here. I think if I added it in StackBlitz that it can be seen. But you can just get a JSON schema and it will, assets JSON schema, let's take a quick look. Here we go, assets JSON schema. You can take a JSON schema and it will render it out. Now, as you see, this is this is also a schema, but this has nothing to do with Formly. The other way around, Formly knows how to interpret this one. And in your application, you have to map certain things where you say, okay, you know what? In JSON schema land, we talk about having integer. Well, this actually extends input and we say, okay, just change type to number. Now, this is also the exact way of how I can go about with my color field. So if I wouldn't, let's quickly test that one. It's good to have it here. So instead of saying, hey, my name here is color and this is a custom implemented field, I can say, you know what? I want to define a type with color that is just like any input, but have it set its template type to color. This should render a very similar thing here. There you go. There you go. And then it will print out the value if all went. Oh, there you go. So yeah, this is the way to do aliases in Formly types. But back to JSON schema. So JSON schema allows you, so basically you prepare your application and you give it a bunch of custom types. And then at the place where you want to use this stuff, so this code works in the way that it takes this asset, it loads it in over HTTP, just like this. It creates a new form group. So it starts out with a clean form. And in the fields array, it loads Formly JSON schema, which is the Formly JSON schema servers, to field config. And this converts the JSON schema to a Formly compatible schema. So pretty interesting stuff if you ask me. And yeah, this is really, really a nice way to work with your forms and basically be interoperable with other platforms and other things. And the nice thing about this is, like, you can do validation on JSON schema. So you basically have validation on your forms definitions. And that is, I think, pretty powerful. So yeah, let me take a sip of coffee here. And I'm excited, I'm stoked that I have 7 people live on Twitch at this moment. Thank you all for your support. I really, really appreciate it. So super nice. So okay, this is about it for how Formly works. Now, one of the other things I talked to you about is my Formly wrapper. It's not a wrapper like 50 Cent or M&M. This is just a wrapper with a W. As I said earlier, you can just go on GitHub, look up Kickstart UI. It's in its own org, and this is where I share all this code. This is a form component that I came up with for a dad joke. Now I missed the dad joke. I'll see it in the replay, Zach. And I'm not even a dad. So UI form component. This is the thing I came up with and I rebuilt and I re-evaluated over time. Wrappers versus wrappers. Yeah, that was a real cheap one. Yep. So the way I do this is that it allows you, well, first of all, you're not prone to any changes that might happen to this Formly form class, but there's quite a lot of different stuff that I do here. So what I'm going to do next is create my footer here. And no, I'm not going to create my footer here. I'm going to create a component, use this footer line, but I'm going to say form. So I'm going to create my own reusable form component. And this is where I'm going to re-implement it. And I'm just going to copy over most of it, but I'll explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So we can get rid of styles. We can get rid of, so we actually need these two. Now, a few reasons for me of having this form. I really like this syntax, but I don't like is that it's called FORMLY form because this leaks in implementation details. So what I want to do is just use UI form. In order for that to work at all, I need to make sure that it's declared here, which it is, and we need to export it as well. So have it being added to our exports. So that's good. And now we need to create the inputs form, fields, and models. So let's quickly do that. Let's open the form component here and say we have an input, which is a form, which I'm going to default to new form group and pass in an empty object. Now, model is also easy because a model is really just an any, but you know, I don't like to type any. I don't like to use any as a type. So like a little back, I found reading somebody's tweet, I think it was, that this is a more proper way to type your JSON objects. I'm not sure. What do you think? I think this is more descriptive. I know there's also like JSON object, would be a good one, which is very much the same. Okay, let's keep it TypeScript for now. Yeah, we have a model which is keyed by string and has an unknown type. And then we have fields. Our fields, we already know that our fields are a formally field config array and initialize this with an empty array. So with that, we converted our contact, our UI form, we converted our syntax to the other syntax. And now let's see why this is not happy. Fields, what did I call it? Fields. Okay, so fields is an array. Let's look at this. So what do we want to do with this? Well, inside here, we definitely do want to use FORMLY form because this is our wrapper, so we don't care. So we say form equals form. Do it alphabetical. So say here fields equals fields and model equals model. So far, nothing shocking and also nothing really gained. Let's make sure that it works. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to get rid of this required one, and I'm going to make name also optional. So name is optional here. And open this contact form. So this is the syntax. One of the reasons that, let's first make sure it works before I start rambling on. So this re-renders, and now it still works. This all still works as expected, great. So one of the things I started building this one is because one of the people I worked with on the team was like, yeah, hey, this is all cool, your stuff here. But if I hit enter on this input, nothing happens. I would like this form to submit. And I was like, sure, that's easy. I had no clue, but it turns out it was pretty easy because we already wrapped around this thing. And the way to do this is to make sure that you're inside a form and you have a button called submit. So this is the next thing we're going to implement. And in order for this to implement, so we're going to wrap around our FORMLY form with a form. And this is what you would probably end up anyway. So it's like basically making your life easier in this sense as well. Let's close down the terminal here. Close down the terminal and create the submit method here. And this is the actual submit method. So this FORMLY form lives in a div. So let's just imitate the same. And make sure that this submit button. Now style display is null, is none. So you won't show it, you won't see it. It will disabled if you did activate the form, but it's not valid. It says something, now this is nice for your screen readers and stuff. With this in place, we can go back to our form, render it out. Here, first name, and this should submit, but it doesn't, because this method doesn't do anything. So let's add a log message here and add, just log out this model. That's what we're interested in. Add something here, hit enter, and there you go. In our form component, line 36. This is the way to do it. Now, for those of you Angularians that are familiar with this kind of stuff, you're probably like, hey, I want to output. Well, that's what I want, believe me. So we're going to go here and we're going to say, get a new output, make sure that we import it, call it action, and have it start up a new, have it initialize a new event emitter. And now we can say, okay, this.action.emit, and just give it some structure. So I'd like to call this always payload, and I generally add a type. So I'm going to say type equals submit in capital. Payload is payload, and yeah, this is it. And then in our contact component, we can actually start listening to the action here. Action. And this action will be submit form. And here I am going to take the event, change the signature of the method here, and we're going to just print event. And this should now, if we refresh the page and hit enter on one of the fields after adding text, this should now console log in contact component line 125. Right, so we successfully got this out, and this thing submit payload, or you can make this thing variable. You can add straightly your NGRX events in here, anything you want. This is now all yours to play with. So again, pretty cool if you ask me. This is, I think this is very likable stuff. Let's see what more do we have inside this custom form helper. So I'm going to close this one, and this is the form component. Yeah, something else we have, we want to make sure that if you build something like this, which I would highly recommend, is that you want this to work on dynamic fields. And I'm not going to build it right now, but if you have the UI form components rendered on your page and something would change, you want this form to be rebuilding. You want this form to rebuild, and this Formly form builder is there for you to help. So this is just a best practice. If you don't do this, your form will start getting wonky. You need to get Formly form builder from ngrx formly/core, and then on init, we're building, calling this.builder.buildForm, pass in these options, which is form, this.fields, this.model, and this.options. This.options, we didn't even bother creating it, so let's quickly create it here, and let's add an input to it, get rid of private, and pass it in Formly form. Options, there you go, options. And there you are, and this renders out the thing as expected. And the form, this component, I've been using it in tons of apps, or a variant of this, and this works pretty well. Now, another thing I like to do, but this is kind of, now it starts getting like more native for a generic shared input. I would probably make a more flexible thing than this, but you can do stuff like, you know what, I probably want to have a submit button at most of my forms anyway, so you can start doing stuff like adding buttons here. Make sure they have this, they validate this, they respect this disabled thing. Make them type submit, which will submit this form. It goes into the ng submit event and calls this submit. So possibilities are endless here. This is just your basic starting point, and this gives you a pretty decent way to get started. So yeah, this is it for my Formly introduction up until here. I'm going to quickly go over this documentation one last time to see if there's anything that's really worth mentioning. This is probably also quite a common use case where you have a thing, and depending on the number of items in your array, you want to repeat multiple instances of the thing. Here it's like investment, and you can add more investments. Name, add some letters. Add one more, and you can get rid of them. And if we take a look at the code that generates this, there is some custom stuff to it. So in the app module, we have a repeat section. And then in our definition, we say, we have an investment, which is repeat. And this uses a form group. So this might be a nice last thing before we wrap up and implement this repeat type, because it's just such a common pattern. So what I'm going to do is copy over this one and going to call it form repeat. Change the name here to formally form repeat. And I'm going to declare it right here. Then inside our types, we have a name repeat and with this component. And this should be sufficient. So to make sure that that works. In the meanwhile, I'm going to copy over this template, add it to the actual component. And I mean, there might be reasons why people don't like this stuff. You might feel out of control, but I think we can all agree that this is a super clean way to do forms, right? This is, I really think you're doing it wrong if you don't use this. This is not to insult you. This is probably because you never realized how amazing this is. Also, again, I don't want to gatekeep. I'm totally fine with people doing things that I would do differently, but yeah, this is a pretty important asset for me to work with. Okay, so the difference here is we didn't extend field type, we extended field array type. And this gave us access to the add and to remove commands, methods, which are here on the field array type. And now in order to use this, we're gonna once again open the contact component. And for now, I'm gonna get rid of everything that's related to the sports team, because I really couldn't care less about these sports. And let's add in some of our own stuff. And well, blatantly copy it from here. So we're going to do the investment stuff. I'm going to copy over this whole structure, paste it in here, and render it out. And then if all is well, we're going to see here, add another investment. There you go. ng4 is not known property of div. Okay, so my formally form module here only imports the bare minimal, but not even common module. So inside this formally repeat, we did an ng4, but it didn't get recognized. It does right now. So let's do that. And then let's in the contact component as well add our debug message. So I'm going to say pretext, form data, and JSON to it. This will This will give some errors in the console. Your expression after had been changed. Blah blah blah. I don't care. Really, I don't. So here you go. We had a new item. We're going to give it a name. So this is whatever date of investment. 29. Oh, stock. Can remove it and add 2 if we want to. We have 2. This all pretty much works as you would expect it. So that's it for the repeat section. I think we can also do an easy repeat of string, which is another common use case. Let's say we want to do that. This command it out for a second so it doesn't get added here. And then, for instance, instead of investments, what do we want to do? Let's say we want to have objectives. Add another objective. Then the field array, instead of having a whole group here, I should be able to just use my UI FORMLY field. Should I? Shouldn't I? I think I should. Use this field group. I might be mistaken here. The UI form helper input. Oh, this needs an array. Yeah, so this doesn't really result in what I'd like, because this will give me an object with the key objective and have one of those. So it might be a different way to define this. Let me quickly see if field array takes simple field. Right. Field array. See if it. Another objective, null. There you go. This does it. This does the trick. We can do it. I knew we could. So, if you want to ever have a multi input where you can add new inputs, remove existing ones, this is probably your best bet, or at least one of the fastest ways to go about it. So the field array also takes a singular field. It also takes a field group if you want a more complex structure, like we can see here with investments. Now, if there's no more questions, then this is all that I have for you today, my friends. It was a pleasure explaining you how FORMLY works. I'm really excited about this stuff, and if you want to see more, if you want to see anything specific, let me know. Let me know in the comment section below, or on Twitter, or wherever you want to get hold of me. Add custom implementation of a wrapper around FORMLY. There you go. Code is up on GitHub, so you can go to github.com/beehive-chat. I am going to verify if this stuff is public, so let me quickly browse it here. There you go, Beehive chat. It is public, so you should be able to see it. I already got people starring this thing, so this is even better. So yeah, content will be on YouTube. Please give me a follow there. Search for BEEMAN.DEV and follow there. If I got 100 followers, I can get a custom domain, so that will be pretty great. And with that, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you all so much for checking, and see you all later. Bye-bye.